I literally can't stand it anymore. Opening up YouTube and seeing the same thumbnails over and over again. I can't tell you how many times, for example, just within the past week after this MOU was signed, that I saw a thumbnail that said, "The United States is humiliated. Donald Trump capitulates. Iran has crushed the United States."
I saw all these titles on YouTube and all these thumbnails, a nuke, there's a nuke will be tested. And this capitalism slowly seeps into the journalistic spaces and also in the independent media. And I think that's a very dangerous phenomenon.
10 to 15 men, they're all men, almost all of them from a Western country, are constantly being recycled in the alternative anti-imperialist media. Every day. I have to say, Karim, sorry to interrupt you, but it's one of the finest lineup of guests. You actually introduce to your audience people who are little known in the alternative media, but who deserve to be widely heard. And I can't commend you enough for doing that.
All right. Good day, everyone. I'm here again with another show. I was saying to Dimitri, I said, this should be our show called Rant of Brothers instead of Band of Brothers. I think that's a good thing that we call our regulars where we vent about the things that are going on. First of all, welcome, brother. I hope everything's fine with you.
I'm doing well, Brother Karim, and always a pleasure to rant with you, my brother. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely, absolutely. Dimitri, I saw your video, and I was thinking we were thinking alike because I was very frustrated about a thing that I saw happening in the anti-imperialist sphere, and that is that, and I actually recently wrote an article about that, and that is that people should really stop believing that theater between Netanyahu and Donald Trump. So what I notice is I'm just baffled by the amount of people in the independent media sphere that immediately explode in like rift between Donald Trump and Netanyahu. And I always say, in politics, words really mean nothing. Everything that's being said in public is for us. It's meant for us. Anything that is really serious that would happen between them, they would never tell us. But I always say, forget about words in politics. It's about material outcomes. And as long as American bombs keep dropping on innocent Arabs in the region and Iranians at times, then of course there is no rift between the two. You cannot tell me there is a rift between Trump and Netanyahu when American bombs keep being shipped to Israel. If there's a rift, they can stop shipping that stuff.
Yes.
And how do you see that, Dimitri?
Or another way to put it is, if even if there is a rift, why does it matter if the bombs are still flowing to Israel? It's just meaningless. Okay, let's assume that you can trust Trump. I'm going to come back to that in a second. And when he says he's angry, and his surrogates tell Axios that he's angry with Netanyahu and he swore at Netanyahu, suppose all of that's true. If he's still sending the weapons, who gives a shit? Who cares if he's angry with Netanyahu? The fact is that Netanyahu is mass murdering women, children, non-military men, resistance fighters, blowing up mosques, blowing up churches, blowing up civilian infrastructure, exterminating emergency workers, mass murdering journalists, using American weapons and American intelligence. And so I don't think we should care in those circumstances whether or not there's ill will between Trump and Netanyahu. But let's just park that for a second. all these people who get excited in the press, and this happens, of course, in both the corporate media, more so in the corporate media, and also in the alternative media, that when Trump or some surrogate of Trump says there is a rift, they go wild and they repeat it as though it's absolutely true. Okay? A lot of the people who have this reaction in the alternative media, um, they say, and I believe them to be telling the truth, that they understand that Donald Trump is a pathological liar. And he's probably the most audacious liar that there has ever been in the White House. Now, it's true, and I think this is one way in which Trump ends up deceiving a lot of people, including in the alternative media. Occasionally, you'll hear a truth bomb from Trump, things that his predecessors wouldn't say, like "We're in there for the oil. We're taking the oil." He'll suddenly say something that's true and exposes the real face of imperialism and his true agenda. But 99% of the time, he's lying through his teeth, and he's doing it in the most audacious manner, and they know that he's a liar. So I have a very simple guiding principle, not just with respect to him, Karim, but with respect to all politicians, particularly in the West. If they tell you something that is that supports their agenda, it advances their agenda, it makes them look good, or at least it makes them look less bad than they otherwise would look, and there's no independent, credible evidence to back it up, the rational operating assumption should be that they're lying. Now, they might be telling the truth, but it's the likelihood is that they're lying, and that should be your assumption. If you're just being rational and looking at the record of Donald Trump, okay, and this lie, or what I regard as a lie, that there's a rift between Trump and Netanyahu, it absolutely serves its purposes. Why? Because a majority of the American people want this war to end, and there is a lot of hostility towards Israel, including amongst not just Democrats, including amongst Republicans, and increasingly amongst Republicans, and I'm sorry, independents, Democrats, and Republicans. And so he wants to make it seem as though he's trying to restrain the rabid dog, okay, the wild animal. This is he just kind of way he describes him. He just gave an interview and he said, I almost fell off my chair laughing to hear this come out of Donald Trump's mouth. He was asked by an Axios reporter, is there a problem with Netanyahu? He goes, no, but I have to keep him sane. He said, as if Donald Trump is sane. But the point that he was trying to make is that, yes, Bibi's a wild man. He's out of control. It's really hard for me to control him, but I'm trying. I'm trying my best. This advances his agenda. Okay, it transfers the heat from Trump to Netanyahu, and so he ends up looking better or less culpable to his own domestic audience. So it advances his agenda, and there's no independent, credible evidence to support that this actually happened. So your operating assumption should be that he's lying. And yet all of these people who know he's a pathological liar all of a sudden start believing him. Because you know why? Because they want to believe it. They want to believe that the U.S. is finally fed up with Israel and is going to throw Israel under the bus. We all want to believe that. But wanting to believe it is not evidence. It's not evidence. And they made the same mistake when Trump came into the White House and said he was going to pursue peace in Ukraine. My ass, he was going to pursue peace in Ukraine. Here we are a year and a half later, and the war is escalating, for Christ's sakes. They're striking deeper and deeper into Russia with larger and larger numbers of drones. There's now open talk in the Russian political elite about striking a European NATO member, more than one perhaps. And this all happened on Donald Trump's watch. He even boasts about being the first president to give lethal weaponry to Ukraine. And yet, when he came into the White House, almost everybody believed, it seemed in the alternative media, that he was serious about wanting peace. And they kept blaming the European leaders or Zelensky. They were trying to put a stop to it. Or hardliners in Moscow were responsible for the failure of the talks. It was never Donald Trump's responsibility. He was the victim. So again, this is all just an attempt to transfer culpability for these wars from Donald Trump to other parties, serves his agenda. There's no evidence to support it, independent, credible evidence. You should be assuming that he is lying.
Yeah, absolutely. And I am even more radical in that, in the sense that I go from the assumption that everything you see politicians say in public is theater. Now, there can be some truth in it. It doesn't mean it's all a lie, but everything they are saying in public in front of the cameras is pretty much useless information because it's literally meant for us. It's always a form of theater. It's such a waste of time, these press conferences and all that shit that these mainstream corporate state medias are saying to are telling us and are talking about, because it's just JD Vance. You also hear him talk about BB Netanyahu. I hate that word. I hate that name. And
Ooh.
and yeah, and then when you hear, he actually revealed himself. I also wrote that in my article. On the one hand, they say, "Oh, there is a rift between Donald Trump and Netanyahu, and he needs to listen to us because oh, this and that." And then in the same breath, JD Vance says, "Let me quickly check the quote." He says that they should be careful, those critics in Israel. And of course he won't name Bibi, by the way. He will just say the critics in Israel, or maybe he will mention Smotrich and Ben Gvir, but not Netanyahu, who he actually says at least Netanyahu is not like this, but there are some voices in Israel. Of course he's just kissing the ass of Netanyahu, but he also mentions there to all those critics, don't forget that 2/3 of the defensive weapons that have protected your homeland have been built by American hands and paid for by American tax dollars. He is literally admitting there, guys, all the bombs that you are using on those innocents over there are for 2/3 are ours. He's literally admitting, on the one hand, he's saying, oh, there's a bit of a rift and oh, he should slow down. On the other hand, all the bombs are made by Americans and are paid for by American taxpayers. You see?
And he calls them, but and notice, as you pointed out, he called them defensive weapons, uh, because he knows. By the way, that press conference, I watched that whole thing in full, Karim, and it was exactly what you're describing. The whole thing was scripted from beginning to end. He chose a guy at the beginning, the very first guy. So he's standing up at the podium and he looks over to his far right and he picks some guy who's apparently sitting in the corner. You can't see him on camera. He says, "Let's start with you," right at the very beginning. And the guy asked him a question which was like a gift from God. You know, do you think the Iranians really understand that we have all of this leverage and we hold all the cards? And doesn't this agreement really reflect how much power the United States has in this relationship? It's like all of the premises of the question were completely laughably false. And why would you choose? Was it random that he chose that? No, he chose that guy because he was told to ask this question. And the last question, same thing. That guy was chosen, and that was the dramatic question, right? And what are you going to do about Netanyahu? He seems to be out of control in Lebanon, and it was all planned out that he was going to end the press conference on that note and not take any questions from anybody, any follow-up questions about what he meant when he said, "We're reminding you that we supply 2/3 of the defensive weapons." He didn't want any follow-up questions. So all of that was scripted. The use of his word defensive, okay, this was all planned out in advance. Every single part of that press conference was a spectacle. But the key thing for those of the people in the alternative media who were saying that his last comment about, they better watch out, we take care of them. Donald Trump is the only powerful leader who still stands with Israel. And they were saying that this was a veiled threat. Earlier in the press conference, he said Donald Trump will never leave Israel. He said no one could. He actually used those words, no one could. So how can you interpret the final commentary as an explicit threat that the United States will abandon Israel when a few minutes earlier, Donald Trump's vice president said unambiguously that Donald Trump will never abandon Israel?
Yeah,
I just,
absolutely.
it's all wishful thinking. This is just people wanting, hearing it and wanting to believe it because it would finally bring justice to the Palestinian people and the rest of the oppressed peoples of this region. But I'm sorry, it's just not reality.
Totally agree, Dimitri. And you know what's it just baffles me what's going on with the independent media, that every time this happens in the mainstream media, they all jump on it. And you see all these big letter titles in YouTube and other places like Rift, Trump and Bibi angry at each other. I'm like, is this all just is this all just profit and getting clicks for these guys now? Because this is really confusing me that so many people in the independent media sphere are still falling for this crap. Because we all know this is theater, and if we keep doing this, they keep manipulating us. You know what I mean? Like, really, believe me, if there was some real problem between those people, you really think they would sit in front of corporate state media and tell us, the whole world and their enemies, about the problems they have? It's just
Good point.
baffling to me, this naivete.
Yeah, that's a very good point. So, I think all you got to do to understand what's going on here is look at the polling data in the United States and Israel. In the United States, the poll shows that a large majority of the population thinks this war was a mistake and it should end. And in Israel, a large majority of the population wants the war to continue. Trump is heading into the midterms. Netanyahu is facing elections, I believe, in September. So, how do you play to your audience in these circumstances while continuing the war, which is what they want to do, both of them? Well, Trump portrays himself as the adult in the room who's trying to, restrain the wild man, the lunatic Netanyahu, who insists on pursuing this war. And Netanyahu portrays himself on the guy who's absolutely determined to pursue this war. And he's going to stand up to the US president, the mighty US president, because he's so committed to the security of Israel. This is exactly what you would expect these two pathological liars and psychopaths to do in order to maximize their chances of success in the coming elections. So it clearly advances their agenda. There's no real credible evidence to back it up that there is a rift. In fact, the actual objective evidence is the bombs that the United States is supplying to Israel. That's objective evidence. And what that's telling you is that the US continues to support Netanyahu and Israel. So this is, in these circumstances, to believe it is really a stunning degree of naivete, in my opinion.
Yeah, that's it's baffling to me. Like, I don't remember who was that, but somebody said, I think that was actually Ehsan Safarnajad. He's an Iranian analyst who's often been on our show, and he said, "What's is so baffling to me," he said, "on the one hand, you guys in the West always complain about mainstream media, how it lies, and it's a fake media and all that stuff." And he said, "But at the moment they say something that sounds new, everybody jumps on it." I was like, "Hey, how can you connect those two contradictions?" And I think that's really true. It's really ridiculous. It brings me to another thing I just wanted to ask you. Now that we're talking about the independent media sphere, uh, I heard a while back there was this bombshell news by I think it was Pepe Escobar and Larry Johnson, that there was a nuke, that they finally made the nuke in Iran, and that Iran was going to test the nuke. What's going on there? Have you heard anything about that, Dimitri?
So I think we should just flesh out what it is that they reported. So my understanding, I actually heard Larry Johnson talk about this a few times, and I think one time I listened to Pepe talk about it on other shows, not on my own show. And as I understand it, what happened was that several weeks ago, um, well before this agreement was signed, uh, a senior source in Pakistan reached out to both of them. And in one program, Larry described this source as having the same access to information um, as Larry Wilkerson had when he was Colonel Larry Wilkerson, when he was the chief of staff to the Secretary of State, Colin Powell. Okay, so he implied that this person was not necessarily the chief of staff to some minister in the Pakistani government, but that level of authority and that level of access to information. And this person, whoever this person is, told Pepe, and again, I'm simply repeating what I recall Larry Johnson saying, told Pepe and Larry Johnson that the Iranian president, I believe it was, Mahmoud Pezeshkian, or it might have been the foreign minister, told the foreign minister of Pakistan that if Trump didn't stop the attacks and the escalation, the violations of the ceasefire, that the Iranians were going to explode a nuclear weapon in the desert somewhere in Iran as a demonstration that they have nuclear weapons. Okay, so this happened, as I recall, maybe you have a better recollection of the timing, 3 to 4 weeks ago, maybe a little more than a month ago. Now, when you think about all the violence that has happened since then, that has been inflicted upon Iran and the Lebanese and the Palestinians since then, surely Iran had more than enough justification to carry out this threat if this threat was in fact communicated to the Americans and through Pakistan. But there's been nothing like that. There's been no explosion in the desert. There's been no threat, not even sort of leaks from Iranian sources that they might demonstrate that their possession of an atomic weapon or a nuclear weapon. Nothing like that. So I want to be clear that I don't think that I think that Pepe and Larry Johnson are telling the truth about what they were told. Okay, I don't think they're making it up. You may have a different view, but I really don't think that they would they would like conspire together just to tell people a complete bullshit story. Somebody did tell them this. I'm pretty sure. I'm willing to assume that. I give them the benefit of the doubt. What my issue with all of this is, why would you trust somebody in the Pakistani government? Like, why do you think, did you see the tongue bath that Pakistan's prime minister gave to Donald Trump last year at
And
Sharm el
why
Sheikh?
all the and quickly, Dimitri, also why all the bombast immediately? If you guys are, especially Pepe, you guys are seasoned journalists. The first thing you do is first check your sources before you make this a big thing.
Yeah. So it clearly was. Look, this is it's human nature, okay, and it happens quite a bit in the alternative media. It clearly was a story that was going to get a hell of a lot of attention, huge amounts of attention. So you kind of have, as a journalist in this situation, you kind of have a conflict of interest because on the one hand, your journalistic responsibility is to take this with a large grain of salt. It is, after all, coming from a dictatorial, illegitimate regime that is completely beholden to Washington, and who knows? But why would you trust these people? On the other hand, you are going to get a tremendous amount of attention if you come out with this story. So you have kind of like a conflict of interest. And this happens a lot in the media. It's not, something that is confined to any two persons, whether it's or in the independent media or in the, it happens a lot. And I think we, as viewers of, because I'm not just a participant in the independent media like you and I are both also, I hate this word, but I'm going to use it because it's kind of convenient. You and I are also consumers of the news in the independent media, right? So those of us who watch these programs, we need to be careful in assessing the veracity of what we're hearing. And we do need to bear in mind that there are these conflicts of interest. People are always looking to expand their audience. We have them too. I hope that you and I do a better job of managing these conflicts of interest, but everybody has them. You want to see your platform expand. If you actually make a living from this, I don't think you do, then you have an even bigger incentive to see your audience expand. And so sometimes you might be inclined to attach more importance to what a source is telling you than you should, because it's going to greatly expand your audience. I think that may be what's going on here. But anyways, that's kind of my take on all of this. What's your take on all of this, brother?
Yeah, no, exactly, and that is one of the reasons, Dimitri, why I have voluntary donations on Substack, but on purpose I've never monetized the channel here on YouTube, because I know that the moment you monetize it, you get pressures from ad companies, you will get under the spotlight, but most importantly, also you start fishing for viral content. That's my fear, and I think I saw a very good discussion by Alon, who said that who said that there is something very nefarious, something evil, something devilish going on the moment you become a content creator on YouTube. YouTube shapes you into that capitalist mindset, and I so agree with that, because uh, in my psychology of capitalism paper, it's an academic paper, I actually talk about this, how we are forced into that growth mindset, that I call it the primacy syndrome, where you I call it the gain primacy syndrome, where you continuously chase gain because it's growth and growth is profit. And the moment you monetize a channel, you start chasing that growth, and you start chasing that more views and more clicks and more shares, and it slowly, it shapes you, it shapes who you are, it shapes how you engage with people, it shapes who you talk to, it shapes. And I think that's a very, very messed up, dangerous aspect that we are all susceptible to, and we are all sensitive to that stuff. So that's for me the reason why I never monetized my YouTube channel, and allow for donations on Substack, um,
Mhm.
because yeah, I think this is one of the things that may actually have played a role when we think about this whole bombast around that nuke. Because I saw all these titles on YouTube and all these thumbnails, a nuke, there's a nuke will be tested, and this. And yeah, sure, that will get a lot of clicks. You will get a lot of attention. You will be boosted in the algorithm and all that kind of stuff. And I
Yeah.
think even the best of us are falling for that psychological kind of how can you say it, pressure, kind of psychological indoctrination of the growth system. What do you think?
Yeah. Well, first of all, let me address the monetize issue. I did monetize our channel, and the reason why my first profession is a lawyer, and when I launched Reason to Resist, I was already retired from my law firm because I had made enough money. I've practiced law for over 30 years to be financially secure for the rest of my life. I didn't need to make any money. So why did I monetize the YouTube channel? I monetize the YouTube channel because we really care about on the ground reporting at Reason to Resist. We've reported from Lebanon 7 times in the last 2 years. We've reported twice from Iran. We've gone to Venezuela. We've gone to Jordan, to Iraq. And, I've gone to Crimea. I went to Moscow. All of this to do on the ground reporting, and that's not by any means an exhaustive list. It's very expensive to do that, and I'm prepared to sink some money into my channel, but I'm not going to. I'm not Elon Musk or I'm not like some multi-billionaire. I don't have anywhere near that kind of money. I have enough money to be secure and take care of my family if they need my assistance for the rest of my life. But I can't be affording to dole out, for indefinitely all of these travel expenses. So I monetized in order to reduce the financial burden of running Reason to Resist and doing all this on the ground reporting. I've never made a profit. We also take donations, but I never ask for them. Almost never. I just put it up there in the video description, and we have people who very generously will donate small amounts of money, and that also has helped to reduce the financial burden of doing all this on the ground reporting. But that's it. I've been approached dozens of times by people who want me to sponsor products or services, and I just tell them all no. No, I draw the line there. I'll monetize. I'll accept donations to reduce the cost of running the program, but I'm not going to turn into a hawker of somebody's goods or services. Can't do it. And other people do. Now that in their defense, not too many people are in my position in the alternative media, where they can actually afford they can do this full time, which I do. It's a full time job and not make any money from it. They do have to make a living. But we just need to be aware as people who listen to these programs that this is, in essence, a conflict of interest. And it's perhaps an unavoidable one, right? Because these people do need to make a living. But it does sometimes affect their judgment, even if they're making their best faith effort to be true to journalistic integrity. So that's, I think, the main lesson. It's for the people who watch these programs. Just be aware that these influences are out there, and inevitably they will impact how the news is presented to them. The one other thing I want to mention, because it's related to this theme, you raised it, I literally can't stand it anymore. Opening up YouTube and seeing the same thumbnails over and over again. I can't tell you how many times, for example, just within the past week after this MOU was signed, that I saw a thumbnail that said, "The United States is humiliated. Donald Trump capitulates. Iran has crushed the United States.
I put
Western
that in my
power."
article. One of those
Yeah,
thumbnails. I put it literally in my article. Yeah.
it's relentless. It was relentless. It's like, and there's no imagination. No one actually, they're not conveying new information. Why do they do this? Because they know that a lot of people out there, people who mean well, want to believe that this is in fact what has happened, and that they're going to be attracted by these thumbnails with, "Oh, Western power is collapsing. It's all over for the U.S. empire." Look, I am be the first person to support the thesis that Western power is in rapid decline. No question about it. And I don't think this is a process that the United States is going to be stopped. But the United States and its so-called allies have immense destructive power at their disposal, and they are capable of anything. And they're extremely conniving, extremely deceptive, extremely perfidious and treacherous. So the idea that this war is over, that the United States is finished as a colonial and imperial power, I think is wishful thinking, to put it mildly. It isn't over, not by a long shot, not for Iran, not for any resistance group. It's certainly not over for the Cuban people or Latin America. This is an ongoing struggle that is far from won. And we could all end up getting consumed in a nuclear conflagration if we're not extremely careful by this civilizational struggle between the white Western supremacists and the non-Western world. So I kind of fed up with those thumbnails because they're not really representing the reality of what we're confronting here.
Yeah, absolutely. And it still brings me back to what I just said. And I think none of us are completely immune to that. I think all these thumbnails that you're talking about are still also that YouTube pressure of growth and success and clicks and more viewers and more likes. So what do? You go extremer, more extreme, more extreme. It becomes almost like you remember you had those gossip magazines back in the day where if you would walk a shop and you would see these gossip magazines with all these exploding headlines like King dumps his secret girlfriend or whatever, and it's like it attracts clicks, it attracts engagement, and you see that kind of capitalism slowly seeps into the journalistic spaces and also in the independent media. And I think that's a very dangerous phenomenon. And like I said, for me personally, and you may be much better to handle that as somebody who is an underground journalist and needs that kind of money, of course. In my case, I would say I on purpose did not monetize my YouTube channel because I'm afraid indeed for that kind of stuff. And I must say, if I go through my video list, some of my most interesting interviews. We're a small channel, so it's already not some exploding numbers, but some of the most interesting interviews are the ones that get the least engagement on YouTube. And if I would rely on that kind of you could say income, these were the people that get snowed under. To be very honest, even though they are intellectually often the most interesting ones, for example, not always, but often. And I think YouTube does that on purpose. The very interesting ones often get also suppressed before they get some popularity. But what I'm trying to say is that what YouTube does is it shapes the kind of guests you have, the kind of people you talk to, also the kind of topics you touch on, and all that stuff. I personally try to evade that, and I see you're doing a very good job, Dimitri. I do not see you do that, luckily, brother, and all your thumbnails are usually perfectly telling what we are going to get. So I think
Mhm.
that's a very good thing. But my goodness. The amount of crap that gets thrown at you every day, I can't handle it, to be very honest. And I think that's that kind of YouTubeification of journalism.
Yeah, there's we've talked about this before. 10 to 15 men. They're all men. Uh, Almost all of them from a Western country are constantly being recycled in the alternative anti-imperialist media every day. And I mean every day. I know you know this, Karim.
Old white man. Yeah, yeah.
See the
Let's not
same.
forget that part, brother.
Yes,
The
exactly.
same old white man.
Fair enough. So every day you see the same men being recycled on the same programs again and again and again and again. And even though I think that these men, all to varying degrees, not every single one of them, some of them, a couple of them, like to me, I just stopped listening to them altogether because I think they're just talking crap. But most of them actually are, they seem to me to be pretty honorable people. They really do care about the crimes being committed by the United States government and its vassals. They are genuine in their criticisms of those things. But they, as you and I have discussed in the past, they have a particular perspective on the world, which is, very much informed by who they are, where they came from, what their roles in government, and so forth. And also, they keep saying the same stuff over and over again, over and over again. I now will, if I see something which looks like an attractive interview on one of these large platforms in the alternative media, I click on it. If in the first 2 minutes I hear nothing new that is of significance, that is informed me about something I didn't know, I just turn it off. I stop listening. Even though I respect the opinions of these men, generally speaking, most of them are, they've got important things to say. But I find that the vast majority of their interviews are extremely repetitive, and that I'm really not learning anything that I didn't already know. And why is that happening? That's happening because when you bring them on your program, you can reliably expect 100 to 200,000 views. That's why that's happening. What we try to do in our
Absolutely.
program, and I know you do this, I have every confidence that you do this. We try to tell people stuff that they don't know. We try to give them a perspective or information that is important, that is, within the realm of what is interesting to them, and that is going to enlighten them. Hopefully, we're not there to just generate views by telling people the same shit over and over again.
No, absolutely, absolutely. And brother, you don't need to start softening your words for the audience and say, "Oh, it's the same men." No, 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 it's the same old white men, because that's a very important detail, brother. You don't need to ditch that, because there are some people who can't handle that stuff, because it's not the people like Gerald Horn who get all the big platforms, or Moin Rabani, by the way, another powerhouse with who we often talk here on the channel, Ajamo Baraka, who has also been on your show. It's the same old Western white guys that we see, and that is an issue, in my opinion.
Yeah. Or the women, people like
Or
Marwa
the
Asman,
women.
Sharmin Narwal, someone else, Zina Elefontos, who I might have mispronounced her last name, but she's been on my program. I know she's
Yeah,
been on yours.
Xenophontos. She's been on our show a few times also.
Amazing, amazing insights. Every time they speak, I learn things. And they're extraordinarily eloquent, immense knowledge, understanding of the region of West Asia and the Eastern Mediterranean. Why don't these women ever appear on these big platforms? I think it's because they're just not going to attract the huge audience. They don't have the profile. They
That's
should.
true.
They should have a bigger profile. They don't, and for whatever reason, and so they're just not going to attract the same number of views.
This is really true, Dimitri. I mean, Elena has been on our show a few times, also recently, and but also, of course, we have Vanessa Beeley often on, Fiorella
Yeah.
Isabel, Tara Al Alami. She's been just on your show. She was on our show.
Mhm.
These are all fantastic, fantastic women, and somehow there is this bias indeed to men, and then of course to Western men, and then mostly Western old white men, and that is something that I think is an issue. You cannot how can you say that, accuse our channel of that. You can go through the video list. It's very diverse. Same with you.
Yeah,
But
you're
but but
plenty. I have to say, Karim, sorry to interrupt you, but it's one of the finest lineup of guests. You actually introduce to your audience people who are little known in the alternative media, but who deserve to be widely heard. And I can't commend you enough for doing that. You've given me many ideas for people I should interview that never even occurred to me. And this is undoubtedly affecting the growth of your channel. If you went and invited a few of these white guys on from time to time, I'm sure your channel would grow much more quickly. But you're more committed to serving the interests of your audience rather than making bucks.
Yeah, absolutely. And you get the most interesting conversations with all these intellectual powerhouses that we try to talk to on this channel. Um, yeah, I'm still baffled that people like Gerald Horn or Ajamu Baraka, that they don't get more space on channels like Nima Al-Koshit. Or I just recently had Nima Al-Koshit on this show. Fantastic conversation. Was really good. I like the guy a lot. Very, very similar resonance on many topics. And I told him he should diversify a bit more, so both in the ethnic division and the sex division. He agreed, so he was very respectful about that. And then I'm like, imagine if you just invite a guy like Gerald Horn onto the show with Nima Al-Koshit. That would be a fantastic interview, man. And every week I follow Gerald Horn's news updates every week on the Activist News Network, and he will update us about everything that's going on, from the Iran war to Ukraine to BRICS to Latin America. The man is reading every single news outlet that you can read, and he he combines it into an explanation that is broad but also very easy to follow. It's very macro, but you understand how the world works. And I'm like, yeah, I'm just astonished that nobody is inviting that guy in these bigger spaces. And yeah, I don't know. I'm
Yes,
just still baffled.
they're also. I agree with all you've said about that. We're actually planning to. We've invited Ajamo onto our program tomorrow to talk about this abomination known as the World Cup, but and what's going on in Latin America. It's also that these people that we're talking about are really eloquent. It's so pleasing to listen to them speak. They are masters of oratory in addition to being extremely knowledgeable and honorable people. So it is a mystery as to why they do not appear. Well, I don't think it's a mystery, but it's a travesty that they aren't given much more space on the alternative media.
Static crackles, voices rise. Truth breaks through their velvet lies. A screen of fire, a shield of steel. Bedbeat media makes you feel no borders, no change, no silence.